Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Planning decisions are taken at council level. It's local council. These are locally accountable. And if people don't like what the council's doing with the planning decisions, it's one of those things that people can make their mind up come the next election and get rid of them, or say, oh, yeah, I'm definitely voting for them. They did me a good term, whatever. But it is local and it is accountable. And so if you're rejected, you do have an appeal process within the council. But if you're rejected after the appeal, for most people, that's more or less it. But there is another option. And if you've got the money, which most individuals won't have, but big construction companies will have, you can take that appeal all the way up to a government minister. In the case of the UK, generally, it would be the Deputy Prime Minister, Office of the Deputy Prime Minister. But otherwise, it would be, whoever the relevant planning minister is. Certainly, in the many years I was working with the house builder, we went maybe 3-4 times. We took it up to, I remember the first time was John Prescott. He was the Deputy Prime Minister there. And we managed to win. But it cost us a lot of money. Now, the point is here, you're losing democracy at a local level by basically stepping over the council because you've got the money. And secondly, if it was just one or two that were going up to the higher level, the ministerial level, and just one or two were given over, it could be argued, well, this one was particularly good for the local economy, or this one was good because there's a particular problem with housing in that area, or there was some environmental factor which made it viable to do. You could understand if it was just a few. But when over 50 and well over 50% of the appeals that go up to ministers are then subsequently approved, number one, it's basically removing the right of councils to decide what's built on their land. And secondly, it don't half smell a grift. You have to wonder if gifts or money has been exchanged for what the developers would call the right decision. Now, there's no indication this has happened, but it seems very, very suspicious given the very high percentage of approvals at state level. We'll take a look at this to see what's going on and why people are getting quite angry at the removal of democracy from the local level. Here you go. So, arrogant SNP Green government rides roughshod over local planning decisions. Some 151 planning appeals were heard by the Scottish Government reporters in 2022-23, with 80 of them being allowed, meaning the decisions of local councillors were overturned. Now, that's over 50%. That's about 52-53%, isn't it? So when you are talking over half of them, rather than being the exception that were overturned, it's the norm that they are overturned if they go to state level. Now, that means anyone with the money, can just basically deny local democracy. And of course, the thing is, if you have got that money, why do you even bother going to the local authority? Just go straight up to your mate, the relevant minister, and say, look, we need this through. He can just apply it. Now, okay, you've got to go through the game, you've got to get the right documentation, blah, 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 all the way up. But you know full well before you start you're going to get this because money. It's not right, and there's no accountability. So the SNP Green government overruled local authorities on over half of all planning appeals last year, the new figures have revealed. What's the point of having a local authority doing the planning then? Really? Freedom of information responses obtained by the Scots Tories show that out of 151 planning appeal decisions in 22-23, 80 were allowed and 71 were dismissed. That means 53% of appeals by developers, including property firms and wind farm giants, were overturned by officials in Edinburgh against the decision of locally elected councillors. And if you're sitting there and you've got a very nice property and you're overlooking the Nesda Glens running down the sea in the distance, it's a beautiful view, and then the local authority gets this application for 50 windmills, 50 big bird choppers sitting there. You go, no, and you put an objection in, and everyone else does. There's 1,000 objections. And that goes in, the council get these 1,000 objections and go, right, we'll look at these. No, application denied. Bang. Next thing you know, boom, application, yes, because they've gone up to government. And like I say, you can't vote that minister out because he's not your constituency minister, so you've got no accountability. He's got no accountability to the decisions made in your area. Got to be quite wrong. Now, of course, you've got to have the occasional time when a government can override, but only exceptional. And they've got to prove that it is for the greater good, for whatever reason it may be. But they can't just do it as the norm. Now, the Freedom of Information also reveals that more than 4 million was spent deciding on these appeals, with figures from the Planning and Environmental Appeals decision showing that they have spent more than 22 million on planning decisions since 2017. Now, imagine that they didn't have that power, they didn't have that authority. That's 22 million that could be spent elsewhere, in health, for example. Shadow Finance and Local Government Secretary Liz Smith says the SNP Green government have rode roughshod over local communities for far too long. She said overruling local authorities in over half of planning decisions sums up the arrogance of the at the heart of this SNP government. Local planning decisions, she said, are best made by those who will be affected by them, not by those living many miles away in Edinburgh. And of course, she is completely right. Now, we once, when I was working for the building company, we once had an appeal. That was for Cardington hangars in Bedfordshire, in Cardington, next to Bedford. And these were dilapidated. They were massive. There's a lot of history there because they were the ones that they built, the R100 and the R101, big airships. A lot of history. They were heritage buildings and all this. But we wanted to develop the land and put about 500 houses up there. Part of it, the planning, was to do the full refurb on the hangars, and that was fine. We were given the initial planning permission, but when we said that we wanted to turn hangar number 2 into a soundstage for Warner Brothers, the council then rescinded the permission. They said, no, the heritage, it's got to be airship heritage, it's got to be all this. Well, and they are big, let me tell you, these hangars are big. I was up in the rafters of one looking down, and the guy that's with me says, can you see it? I said, can you see what? He says, the airship, the Goodyear blimp. I went, no, and he pointed, there it is in the corner. The Goodyear blimp, and I couldn't see it because these things are so big it was hiding in the corner. Are you kidding me? That's how big they are. Well, we did get it through. We had to go up to Peel. This was John Prescott. We went up to John Prescott at the time. He was the Deputy Prime Minister. And we got it in because Hangar 1 was being used by Airship Industries. Or would be once we'd finished the planning. And so once we finished the refurb. So we'd finished the refurb on 1. Airship Industries went in on 1. And then Warner Brothers wrote as well. And they put a lot of money into the planning appeal to say that they've got the heritage in Hangar 1. And what they're doing in Hangar 2 was creating long-term jobs. Because they got one of the biggest sound stages in Britain. Indeed, in Europe. In fact, that's seen in the was it The Dark Knight, where the Joker is in the van driving down the road and he opens the side door and they've got the bazooka blowing into the car and that. That was all filmed indoors. They built that whole thing inside the hangars. They're that big. Anyway, long story short, we got the planning permission and much to the chagrin of the local council. But then it turned out okay because once they started doing things, we started getting the councillors up there and they could start seeing what was going on and all this. And they started getting, oh, it's a bit like having a bit of Hollywood on your doorstep. And then they were pleased with it because it did actually bring in a lot of money then later to the local community. And that's where you have all these things and it's fantastic. And they filmed Dumbo there and they had 38 elephants. It was the biggest collection of elephants the country's ever seen. And let me tell you, 7 tons of it every day had to be removed. There was a whole team just to move 7 tons of it every day. And boy, did it stink. Anyway, that was the Warner Brothers stage up there. But that we had to go to the appeal up. But of course, we were a big company. We're a £500 million company. We can afford this. We can afford our lawyers on £1,000 an hour. What hopes anyone local got? They can't do that. They haven't got the wherewithal for that. So, it is a removal of democracy and it's wrong. Anyway, the Scottish Government's round this off now. Scottish Government spokesman said a vast majority of planning applications are determined by local authorities. Of the many thousands of applications determined last year, just 151 were appealed. Yes, it's not the number that were appealed that's the issue. It's the fact that over half of them were then granted. It should be the exception, not the rule. And that's the problem. And that is the removal of democracy. Like I say, how do the people in that area vote out the minister that decides? They can't. And the people of his constituency, they don't care. They don't care that he's denied somebody a garage extension, No democracy, no accountability. It's the SNP way. Anyway, I'm going to round off and come up. Now, of course, again, speaking from experience, I have to wonder why so many of these appeals are put through. I mean, it is exceptionally high. And I can't help but draw the conclusion that there is grift. There is a bit of that, bit of backsheesh, a bit of you scratch my back, I'll fill your pocket. Envelopes with cash, you know, little things like that. Oh, we're building 30 houses. It'd be a shame if one of them went rather cheaply to your nephew who's struggling. Not saying that is happening. I'm saying it's a possibility that that's happening. It's something that I know for a fact has happened in the past. I know, and I'm not going to say the name of the company because I like my house, I want to keep it, but I know one large house builder that only got planning permission for a 200 home, 200 building estate in a very nice area, which was actually partially into Greenbelt, and they only got it because they somehow found that they had two houses that were able to sell for an exceedingly low price, and they just randomly and coincidentally happened to sell them to two people related to people on the planning committee. I'm not going to say who, what, where or when, but I know it happened. We know it happened. Everybody knew it happened. And everyone kept stum because this is it, the code of silence, because you don't go and tell on him, because then that sort of thing stops, because you might need to do it later on. So it's let's just keep our mouths shut. And that's what happens. Guarantee that's what happens a lot. Certainly I know it's happened. But I'm not going to say who, what, where or when, because, hey, you know, it's sued to smithereens. Anyway, I shall stop there. Thank you very much for watching. If you like what you see here on the channel, please hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, leave a like, leave a comment, please share the video. Until next time, remember, stay safe, stay well, and always object if it's wind farms. Bye.